thought that they actually found that gold.
Yep.
You're live.
It wouldn't wash very far.
Huh?
It wouldn't wash very far.
No,
No, it'd be pretty much where it fell out.
yeah,
I put a mark on that tree nearby.
yeah. Well, do they still make the backhoes during the log drive? Jack, you're, oh, is it time?
Good evening, 6 o'clock. We'll bring this second meeting of the Skowhegan Planning Board to order for the month of April. We do have a quorum. We're missing one, Andy Thorpe, and our alternate, Aaron. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting. So moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Is there any corrections or additions? Seeing none, we'll vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Motion passes. Site plan subdivision, flood hazard, shoreline zoning, nothing under that. Items by public, none. Communications, none. Unfinished business. We're gathered tonight for a workshop for a handful of ordinances. And we'll start with the homeless shelters and public camping ordinance that's being proposed. Where was this derived from originally, this ordinance?
This is a new draft I didn't get this draft.
You didn't create it? It's, where did it come from?
It was sent to me, I believe, through Brian Aaron, is that correct?
Yeah. We've had meetings talking about camping ordinances before, prior. And then some other stuff going on in town, have some sort of licensing, some sort of something in place for the homeless shelter situations, to then be able to manage the tax area.
It's sort of, combine two different things into one ordinance. That, I suppose, they affect each other.
My understanding is that a public camping ordinance does affect, like, in itself become sort of a homeless shelter ordinance when you look at banning public camping in specific places or spaces. That's my understanding of why they would be combined. Is that okay?
Now, did you bring up something about the Supreme Court actually?
Yeah, so, 2024, I believe it's grants past Oregon or California. This has become case law, and the outcome was that municipalities cannot criminalize sleeping in public if there's no adequate shelter alternatives. So, and a lot of the language in this ordinance, we would have to revise it to include when shelter space is available. Like, it seems like it could only be enforced if shelter, or it couldn't be enforced if there was shelter space available.
So basically, we could, if there's shelter available, when that's available, does that mean in town, or does that mean
I believe in the municipality, like
in the
within,
municipality?
I don't know the exact way it was defined, but within like reasonable transportation distance would be my assumption. And I can look into it further, how that is defined. But basically when shelter space is available, we can enforce a public camping ban. But if shelter space isn't available, then according to the Supreme Court, it just can't be done because there's no other alternative. Yeah, that's my interpretation of the federal Supreme Court case.
Okay, well, Anybody have anything they want to bring up?
Yeah, a
concerning
couple
this?
questions. Thank you for bringing this forward. I know we talked about it. I know the select board has asked for this. I understand what it's getting at. I'm gonna go through, there's a couple spots that just, a couple things that jumped out at me. Has Ken Lexier reviewed this latest draft?
Ken has reviewed all of these.
Okay.
Just that we've done through iterations. It's not me bringing them forward.
Yeah.
Bringing them on.
Yeah.
Just to get that clear. But they are, yes, they have been reviewed. Mike and they've been gone through, we've done back any changes. What you see is where we are.
Okay, thank you. So going through where it says municipal property, any owned, leased, managed, or controlled by the town of Skowhegan, including parks, sidewalks, parking areas. So that's a much broader sort of definition than like safe zones. So that would include places like Lake George, that would include Coburn Park, across the river, mostly municipal parks. That wouldn't include like Somerset Woods property that exists unless.
Correct, yeah.
Yep,
Yep, private property is this thing. Basically, these are issues we've had in these areas
Yeah.
with the police department, with the highway department, being able to handle it.
I get the licensing, cause I think that's come up under the current situation. My question on the licensing piece is currently like group homes in the town and residential facilities, is there a specific licensing for them?
No, we go off on occupancy, so
Okay.
if you change your licensing or you change any aspect of it, you need to get an occupancy inspection. So this is basically just giving us the right, or that, giving the town the ability to be able to check in once a year and say, hey, we wanna make sure everything's still up to code, we wanna make sure a way to look at these facilities so we don't end up in the situation that we're in now without a way to, waiting on complaints or something to happen.
But this says you can inspect it once a month,
Says we may, yes.
and it also requires, I mean, as I, you know, I'm not saying we don't need something, but as I read down through this, it seems like this is written to prohibit any homeless shelter in our town because of very, very stringent regulation above and beyond how we regulate anything else that I see.
Well, this just says that we follow the NFPA and building codes and stuff like that. It says nothing besides that. So we have more ways to enforce a salvage yard, that somebody wants to put a salvage yard in versus a
No, but-
bigger commercial building. We have no way to enforce those, to license them. We license everything else in town.
One thing I did notice in here is that, you know, if they have somebody new there, working there, they can't really work there until the town's notified. It seems like all of a sudden you're gonna have a heavy regulatory burden for this, just because they've gotta report to you all the time. Anything going on there is just a continual red tape.
Is that in relation to the background checks?
Well, it would be background, it's just, as I read down through the whole thing, that's.
Mind if I jump in?
Yes, great.
So under the license application requirements, facility management, direct contact information, like, you know, that just means like who's in charge, that's like,
Yes,
so just.
the town has a contact
Yeah.
for who's running the facility.
Yeah, and you know, property owner, you know, that this, like, most of these I'm just saying out loud because they make sense. I'm not gonna dive into the list of staff yet, I'll get to that in a minute. Maximum proposed occupancy, so that's just them stating what the maximum occupancy is, and then there's a discussion about whether it meets sort of the rest of the requirements, because there's some others, like so many toilets, so many sinks, so many.
Correct, that's all
Yeah.
based off of building code.
Okay.
That's anything else we deal with
Yep.
the size of anything.
I understand the floor plan, because that hasn't, you know, like, as I say these, I'm understanding why they're there, because under current circumstances, previous concerns, questions we had, like, that didn't exist, the floor plan, fire safety evacuation plan, staffing supervisory plan. I understand why that's there. Security procedures, I guess, when I see security procedures, I think of, you know, adequate lighting, I think of all those sorts of things. So that becomes sort of a conversation with the code office, so that it's clear, like, here's our security plan for this facility.
Yes, and involving the fire department.
Okay.
The fire chief oversees NFPA, fire chief oversees NFPA,
Okay, great.
you know, sprinkler systems.
Yep.
Fire protection systems, smoke detectors, emergency lights.
So that would require code, fire department, could involve the fire marshal. Okay. I'm only asking these out loud because I just want to understand
Nope,
sort of the chain of command, and
Yep.
So guest intake procedures, code of conduct, I think I understand that. It kind of gets into rules of the facility and things like that, so again, that's kind of something the staff for the town would review, okay. I understand the removal, why 24-hour contact. So, requires vetting, associated fees have been paid, okay, I get that. So the 1,000 feet piece, trying to gauge what 1,000 feet looks like in like Skowhegan proper. So if one point in time, there was a large property for sale across from Coburn Park. It's kind of a question, what could happen to it? That property would be in 1,000 feet of, say, the new school.
Correct.
Okay. Do we have, I'm trying to think of other setbacks we have in town.
We have, we have required safe zones around all the schools.
Okay.
That prevents, needle exchanges, marijuana, cultivation sites, registered sex offenders.
Yep.
Controlled substance,
Yep.
falls into our controlled substance ordinance, that's just specifying that,
Okay.
that none of those other things gonna exist there, so.
Why would we put 1,000 feet from any other licensed homeless shelter? Why would you, or what benefit, it's in here, what benefit to the town is that? I can understand not having, having it close to a school or other, these safe zones, but why 1,000 feet from another licensed homeless shelter?
Overflow, I would assume, I'm not positive,
Um,
I didn't read it that way.
there's another spot where it talks about, congregating, I believe. So I think, that was my read of that,
Yeah.
so that you don't have people congregating, I guess. That was, I don't know if that, like, so it's, you don't have a lot of people in one area, because I did see that reference somewhere else.
What about, that, there again, that 1,000 feet in the safety zone? Isn't that one on McClellan Street, is it? Isn't that within 1,000 feet of the ball field, of the community center?
The current
Yeah,
shelter,
yeah,
it's just outside it.
just outside.
Property's just outside it.
Yeah.
Is there property on the corner? Is that within 1,000 feet?
I don't know off the top of my head. I think part of it is, part of it isn't. I'm not positive.
So this,
They'd be grandfathered?
I don't know, but it's not a home, it's nothing there now. So, but they own that property on the corner of the,
I don't believe it puts it into that.
so. Say it again?
I said I don't believe it puts it into that now,
It doesn't.
but that would be, that would be depending if part of the property was and part of it wasn't. I mean, this is not geared to go against anybody.
It's just sort of, as I read down through here, the impression I got was the red tape, I mean, I can understand all the stuff that's consistent with every other facility housing people. I can understand all of that stuff, but all the extra things required for this would seem to, to me, it would seem to force people to not have a homeless shelter here. And then we run into the Supreme Court's decision saying if you don't have housing for the homeless, you can't keep them from sleeping on your public property. And so that, you know, we're making it harder to do a homeless shelter, and with the idea of we don't want, at the same time, we don't want people sleeping in public property. We want them housed somewhere. Does that make sense, or am I?
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't want a temp site down at Coven Park. You know,
So they're basically saying they could do that. The Supreme Court is saying if there's not a place for them to go, you can't keep them from sleeping on public property.
Also, like, before grants pass, this finding, when towns have put, these sorts of bans into place, towns were finding that it was moving people to private property, and people were finding large lots with private property that people would hide out on, if there was like really strict enforcement in those public spaces. Yeah. I think we could add some language, regarding like 1,000 feet, for example, that would give the planning board more flexibility about something along the lines of like the board may reduce required separation distances upon a finding that the proposed use will not adversely impact public health. Just like a little more specific language regarding some of these requirements, I think could help us accomplish the intended goal without imposing very strict rules and regulations that make a facility like this unrealistic. So it would allow people to propose a site, and it would allow them to come here and present the site, and then we could determine whether 1,000 feet is strictly necessary in this situation, or if given the case, it doesn't necessarily have to be 1,000 feet. Like, I think there's foundation here that we can add more specific language to. Well,
So it seems like, you know, along those lines of thinking, you know, if we were to put in something that allowed for a variance, I think that could help with a lot of those specific setbacks. You know, even something like here where it references off-street parking for staff and operations, like, I understand that, but, you know, I might just not be thinking of a spot right now that maybe, you know, off-street parking could consist of a municipal lot. Or if it's on a street that's not an issue, you know, if it's not impeding traffic, if it's not, you know, a detriment to the neighborhood, then, you know, I could see a scenario where the board would be fine to allow on-street parking.
which section is the parking?
Site development standards. Right there.
Oh, yeah, yes, yeah.
So, you know, I understand on that section, it's adequate exterior lighting, off-street parking, emergency vehicle access, you know, that makes total sense. You know, the reasonable security measures, I think, you know, that's a conversation about just making sure the site's secure. Often that's a situation of after hours or certain times of day, you know, making sure that there's, you know, people are not necessarily coming or going, that there's sort of a time where the residents there are in for the night. I think that's pretty standard procedure. Clean and sanitary exterior conditions. We do require that already, I believe, in the property maintenance ordinance. I believe, you know, trash and recycling containers is something that we've continually talked more about with all sorts of development in town. I do struggle a little bit. I understand the operational procedures preventing excessive outdoor congregation. I know this comes up when citing homeless shelters in other communities. I just don't know what that looks like.
I think, like, specifically relating to that outdoor congregation, I think the language needs to be a little more specific there, and that's something I can do. But I guess it would be helpful to define here what exactly we're permitting and not permitting regarding the outdoor congregation to make sure we get that detail right.
Yeah.
Right now, during the day, they have to be out of that shelter, right? They have to be out of the shelter up on Collins Street for a certain amount of time?
I don't know. I don't know. I know some folks leave. I don't know if some folks stay and work. It's, you know,
Yeah,
some shelters do, you know, require people to leave.
right.
I don't, you know, like broadly speaking, you know, there's, I think some shelters have like a turnover, or there's time when people are out.
I know I've been up there and dropped some stuff off, you know, like clothing. And there have been people there. I'm assuming that he allows them to stay there during the day. But I really don't know.
Yeah, I don't know a lot about like the schedule. It's been a while since I interacted. I know that, you know, there are church services and other things that occur, you know, throughout the day, different times. And I know just from talking to him years ago, you know, at times there was like a, you know, Bible study group or other types of group. But I think it's a lot of the residents and the folks seem to be out and about. And then there are folks that do, you know, work and other things. And then there's some folks that I think provide service both on site and around. So at the end, it kind of summarizes. It says facilities must comply with, you know, provisions of the property maintenance ordinance, land use, and other municipal regulations. I think that makes total sense. I think the maximum occupancy permit here is spelled out, you know, well, where it talks about it's determined by the code enforcement officer based on the building's codes, life safety codes, sanitary facilities, emergency egress requirements. And then the order of, or below where it talks about sanitation facilities, I would just ask, where that number, it seems reasonable, I just don't know enough. I feel like ignorant in that piece, like where that number comes from.
It'll all be based off occupancy level.
Okay.
That's any other business.
Are these standard, or
Yeah,
these
Okay.
are the standard based on occupancy for any other building?
yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
Okay.
anybody's gonna have to go through site plan
Yep.
anyways. This is all covered in the state of Maine's homeless solution rule
Uh-huh.
for
Okay.
funded, homeless shelters. There are no regulations
Yeah.
for any sort of private, facilities out there. The state does not oversee them and does not want to oversee
Yep.
them. So this is, a lot of complaints on some of the places that we do have, and being able to manage what we have faced in the last year, to have something in the effect of that, and this has been asked for by the select board several times. You guys had a joint meeting on it, so
Yep.
I'm just putting it on paper and bringing it to you guys to get some notes on it before it goes back to the select board.
If I was to meet a person out on the street and they tell me they're homeless and I was to invite them to stay at my home, do I fall under this? Does my home now become a facility for the homeless?
It'd be a guest.
I was gonna answer you. They'd be a guest, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
just,
obviously they would be a guest.
Yeah.
But my question is, do I now fall under this because of the definition of, that we see back at the beginning? Homeless shelter, any facility operated by I mean, the general idea, I think, is, some charitable entity whose sole purpose is to provide housing for the homeless, but is what I just described excluded from this definition?
Well, I suppose if you just have one person with you.
Well, no, let's say I have a whole family.
Well, heck, I'll come over to your place and we'll find out.
Well, I mean, that was, but that's something, it's up to me.
All right,
It's not like,
but you're not, but maybe,
it's not like we're putting out a shingle and saying this is
Right.
this is a sign, but let's say, we choose to help somebody.
Well, I would think that would be your prerogative. That's your home.
I know,
If you-
but this is dealing with private and public property. That's why I'm asking this question. Remember, every new ordinance we make is a new law. Freedoms are lost. Some things need to be made, but we've got to be careful how we make them so that they don't do something beyond what we intended for them to do.
well,
Can-
it does say here, private, any facility operated by a public, private, non.
How would you interpret that, Aaron? My question.
I would just interpret the ordinance as written. This isn't my workshop, this is your.
I know, but
You're directing,
you'll be the
directing
one.
everything at me
Yeah.
in this meeting, and this is for you to talk.
Yeah.
I just put it on paper.
Yeah.
I'm just the guy that writes it up, that is what's asked to do to present it to you. And
Oh.
I'm gonna take from this meeting the notes you have, and this will be presented to the
Okay.
select board from here.
Um,
So,
I'm not trying to be critical because I know you're the code enforcement officer. You're the one that's going to be interpreting it.
yeah, I would
So-
interpret it as it's your house, and I think you're reaching extremely hard right now. And I would think it would be read as, that is the property that is licensed as a shelter.
Okay.
And your home is your home. This is a facility that needs to be managed and needs to be taken care of and licensed, just like anything else in the town is licensed. That's mine.
I would agree with Aaron. I think the fact that it says public, private, nonprofit, charitable, religious organization, I think as an individual with a home, you don't qualify as an organization. That's my interpretation.
Well, let's say our church decides to do
Your
that.
church has a different occupancy,
Mhm.
and it is assembly occupancy, therefore it has a different occupancy permit than your home. You're referring to two different things. So as the code enforcement officer, whatever the occupancy permit states, your church is different from your home. Your home is different than a gas station. Your home is different than this assembly. This assembly, based on square footage, is allowed to have so many occupants. Single-family residence and multiple family residencies are classified completely different than anything else. So based on being the code enforcement officer for the town of Skowhegan, that's how I would interpret that. And that's how they would get an occupancy permit, based on occupancy load and what they're using the facility for.
So you invite anybody you want to the house.
As many as I want.
Basically, you can afford,
Huh?
as many as you can afford.
As I can afford.
I've
The-
had people in dire straits that, I had some of them chained, well, not people, but part of the crew was chained outside. And, yeah. But I knew that if that was a nuisance, with the barking and so on and so forth, that things would have to change. But anyway, just something that happened back along, and a circumstance came up, and someone was in need. And so, yeah, and until the backing really became a problem, then there would have been no issue. Anyway,
I had a question specific to the bed bugs and infestations. So I'm familiar with other public spaces. I don't necessarily know if this happened in Skowhegan. This is broadly speaking. You know, there's been other public spaces throughout the state that have had issues with bed bugs. I think of some library facilities, and again, I'll say not in Skowhegan, but there was other libraries in the state that have had issue with bed bugs. Would that, in that situation, do you think that would kind of be like a standard practice for the code enforcement officer to engage in that pest
It
infest?
already is.
Okay, good.
It is with rental properties, with landlords,
Yep.
with tenants. We have an open rapport.
Yep.
With the shelter as it is now, with that stuff, with communication. A lot of the stuff the majority of the stuff that's in here, they do
Yep.
do. The operating shelters already do these things.
Yep.
It's just saying that now we have a baseline to make sure that it gets done.
Have you dealt with bed bugs in other residential facilities? I'm thinking of like, I know it's probably happened in rentals, but like other group home settings and things like that? Okay. Do you have the mechanism in those places now to like interact and get these monthly reports and engage?
Yes, by main state statute.
Okay.
The people that run the facilities, it is their responsibility to make sure that they're maintained in a healthy, hazard-free environment.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm using this as an opportunity to educate myself, so I appreciate that. All right.
So this requirement for pest control is consistent with other housing situations in town. So they're required to have monthly inspections by professional pest control people.
No.
No.
Required to have monthly inspections. Household health officer, when they do come up, then that is, we get complaints on it, we make phone calls to check in. And then people that are the operators, it's their responsibility to make sure that it's not a health hazard.
Okay, so, but here we're requiring monthly inspections to be done by some pest control company, basically. Do you think that's warranted? This type of situation? Is there a lot more issue than in other situations in town?
Yeah.
There's a higher
My
turn.
opinion, as what I've dealt with in the past year being code enforcement officer here, yeah.
Just because of the transient nature of people coming in and coming out, there's a lot higher occurrence of that.
Higher
situation.
turnover of people. So,
What do they cause? Other than biting, do they carry any type of disease? Bed bugs, I've never heard of that.
Infestation, itching. I'm not a bed bug expert by any means, but, you know, they're a problem,
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah,
And once you get them, they're hard to get rid of.
yeah.
When I think that the issue then becomes, where are the other infestations? You know, if they're not controlled at that site, there will be,
They spread. We
Yeah.
have complaints because of businesses and
yeah.
our own hospital was called this town to complain about bed bugs being spread. So if you don't think that's a problem, then I'm sure you would. It is something that there are hours and hours spent by this office dealing with the town of Skowhegan.
So thinking about pest management plans and requiring a pest management plan, it would seem like it would be standard that it's a monthly thing. So like if somebody's a facility, I think of, you know, you brought up the hospital, you know, they have a pest management plan It exists for all sorts of things. It's probably done on a monthly basis. So this is requiring monthly inspection. And then inspection reports, it says inspection reports shall be submitted to the town. So I guess that gives you the ability, if these issues are occurring, you can then request those. Okay.
So how much time do you think will be required of you if the facility is following this procedure?
Besides reading emails and checking when they send them in.
That's just pretty much it?
Pretty much it. I mean,
Unless
the
you're
numbers
called
we have
in.
now, like I said, they pretty much have all of this stuff adopted. It's the problem when facilities don't, when there's nothing to make sure that they follow it. I mean, the facilities and the places that do have issues, they email me. I mean, I get an inspection report and it just make sure they're actively treating it. So when other businesses or entities in the town of Skowhegan call because they have an issue and they have a concern, because yes, they are working on it. They are being diligent with it. So.
Is there any other business that is required to provide the town with staff and volunteers anytime they add somebody new or change somebody?
Not to my knowledge, that doesn't mean that there isn't.
Why is that here? If it's a private organization and they've got all these other things, why does the town need to micromanage their volunteers and all of that stuff?
Again,
You don't know?
more or less falls under a vetting of individuals and the amount of transient in nature.
Safety.
So who's doing, now the vetting process will be something that the town's going to do, but it's gonna charge them for whatever takes place, or?
Here it's spelled out as such costs may include but not limited to administrative review, background checks where permitted by law, and any associated fees incurred by the town of Skowhegan Police Department. So I'm pretty sure now if you're gonna do a background check on a volunteer or an employee, they need to sign off that they're aware there's a background check being conducted. So I believe I don't know if there's I assume probably folks that work for the rec department probably go through a background check. People at the police department go through a background check. I don't know, do the front office folks have to go through a background check? Does everybody that works for the town has to go through a background check?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'll be honest, the staff vetting and identification piece is sort of a no-go for me. I understand why it's in here, I understand the interest, but I think that's a step beyond health and safety and sort of land use that I think the planning board should be getting involved in, so I'll just state that.
I just want to say I've volunteered at a hospital, and I've also worked at an assisted living facility. Both times I had to have background checks. And it seems like when you work with people, they require background checks, and I think it's just for safety. That's my take. This is everywhere I've had to have background check. So I can see, why they put it in here, but
So I'm just trying to figure out, is this saying the name is submitted by them and then the town's doing the vetting? Or are they to do the vetting and then if they need the town services to do the vetting, they're paying for it? I'm trying to figure out what this is actually communicating. if I'm trying to figure it out, then I'm sure whoever's going to try to comply with this is going to try to figure it out too. So it ought to be worded in a way, at least that we understand what it is that's being done. And it would be smart if you're involved in that kind of operation to have whoever is responsible vetted. I mean, we live in a time when I think you would bear some liability if something goes wrong if you haven't
So,
taken every precaution.
yeah, and I agree, and I agree with the other comments around this. I think it's up to the private entity, whether it's a for-profit, nonprofit. I think the hospital is like a great example of, you know, an entity that's requiring background checks that's outside of, you know, I have to go and get fingerprinted to get my guide's license renewed. You know, it's you know, and I'm required to go through a background check, you know, service. It's not, you know, so I feel like that's an appropriate thing. I think where I'm really uncomfortable is that the town has sort of the objective and subjective ability to do an administrative review in those background checks for a private entity. And I just, you know, if this was like a state requirement, or if it was, you know, a statutory requirement for, you know, homeless shelters across the board. There are a number of professions that require a background check, and as part of that, you go through a service.
Where does this say that the town is responsible? I see that up here, the owner operator is responsible. the
For
vetting
costs.
For the cost. Where does it say anything that we're gonna be doing, other than if they ask us to do it?
Such costs may include, but not limited to.
So, in other words, that, it says here, the owner or operator of the homeless shelter should be responsible associated with the review and vetting of staff, but it doesn't mean they're necessarily gonna come to the town for that. You know, it doesn't say any place in here that they're responsible for doing it. If they come to the town and ask us, then they're gonna be responsible for any cost. That's what I take from that, unless it's.
I mean, if it's not saying that the town's gonna do it, why is it here?
So I think it also says, all staff and volunteers and individuals involved in the operation of the homeless shelter shall be subject to review by the police department prior to working at the facility.
Yeah, that,
So that to me is saying that, you know, the police department's gonna see a list of these folks.
yeah, maybe we should just stay right out of it.
Yeah, I'm just not familiar with any other business in town, any public entity, any private entity that opens up their, you know, their employment records to the town police department. And then the town police department has any sort of say in that. You know, even the school district, when they do a background check, it's done, you know, through a service. It's, you know,
Right.
it's not like there's a list of school department employees given to the police department for any of this level of review, so. Same goes for, you know, the hospital, same goes, you know,
Right, that's a little bit of an overreach on the town.
I understand what, you know, the interest of doing it is. I just don't feel, you know, I'm also like, seems to me there's a liability aspect, there seems to be, you know, and I also don't know like what the criteria is. You know what I mean? It's like,
So if the town's doing the vetting and the person ends up doing wrong, if they got the vetting wrong, is the town on the hook now because the town said this person's okay?
Well, a lawyer could make it that way.
yeah,
You could write it.
I don't know. You know,
You could write it to do that.
I also, you know, it's interesting, like, I understand if the town, say internally, if the town uses its police department to do this type of work and these types of background checks, you know, to me, like, that makes sense, you know, I'd be surprised if that's how we're using our PD and their time, you know, especially now where there's like services that you can pay for that do it, you know, you can send someone off to get background checked and fingerprinted. I just feel like, I'm just not comfortable stepping into this level of like employee, volunteer, you know.
Then probably we should eliminate that.
Why don't we follow what the hospital does? What is their procedure for doing background checks and maybe apply it to,
Well, theirs would be something they decide to do to protect themselves. It's not something that they're mandated to do that I know of. That,
It's at like the organization level, not at the municipal or state or federal level.
so, this is being required by what, the state?
not that we know of.
Then I don't see why we wouldn't just, we have no business then. Eliminate that whole vetting and identification. I mean, that's their responsibility to check on their own employees, not ours.
Right.
But why not just eliminate the vetting, staff vetting and identification, all that?
Yeah, but it's a community safety thing too. I mean, with the transients coming in and going out, you know, the people that live there may wanna know, the community may wanna know.
But they're not gonna know. I mean, the whole thing is, they're not gonna be allowed to give that information out to the neighbors. I mean, that's,
Right, but if there's an offender there, they would be on the list, so you would know.
I'm sure there's
So-
offenders in that homeless shelter. But I don't think that we should get into worrying about that vetting. Unfortunately.
Well, I think the vetting is for staff, not the people coming in and out, so. I mean,
Still, I mean, I'd wanna know who's working there. I mean, the community may not know, but I think the authorities should be aware, like the police should be aware of who's there.
No, that would be like the why not nursing homes, why shouldn't the police know who's working? I mean, how about the nurse that injected patients with poison? I mean, they vetted that person, but it didn't do any good. I don't, I think it's the responsibility of the facility and not the town. I don't think that we should get involved in it. And because like they're saying, we could end up with a liability. Saying, well, we checked them out, and we didn't do a good job, so now we're gonna sue you for several $1 million. And then we're gonna, it will happen.
You know, and where it requires sort of that staffing plan piece, I feel like that's like, I'm fine with that level, like, when public safety, first responders show up there, they should know who's in charge, there should be like clear sort of chain of command, those sorts of things.
What if,
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine, please.
What if we put in here that the police had the ability to do it, but we still left them, you know, self-directing, you know, their administration, but the police had the ability to check on those, I mean, that would, I mean, right here in this, Aaron has the ability to go in there every month if he needed to, or if he wanted to, okay? But it wouldn't put it on, it wouldn't make it the police department's responsibility, but if there was some concern, part of the licensing is that they have to make them available for a background check or something like that. I don't.
The only time the police would really be involved if a problem came, something happened, then they would come in anyway. If there was, some type of confrontation or something like that. Other than that.
At that point, they don't need the permission.
Right. So I think that we should just drop the vetting and leave it up to the individual that owns the place.
So, is anyone aware, and I'll throw this question out broadly, is anyone aware that the police department has not been allowed access to the homeless shelter when they've needed it? Yes.
Is that a true statement? or
I don't know,
you're
I
just
don't know, I'm
asking?
just asking, you know what I mean? I'm just trying to,
I don't think so, but I know they're there frequently.
yeah, and I get that, you know what I mean? I'm just trying to figure out, like, has there been an impediment of, you know, I also know that, like, clearly this is trying to get at the fact that it seems like it would be a concern that people that may have a criminal history are working there. But there are people that have a criminal history all over this town.
Right.
There's people that are highly thought after, you know, like people that are well respected in this community that have a criminal record. I think of business owners. And I was just thinking of this recently. There used to be a business owner that would contact me that was seeking a pardon. And I stopped paying attention. I don't know if they were ever successful in that process. But, you know, there's somebody that is extremely well respected. It had, you know, been a felony that they had on their record for probably 30 plus years. It impeded them from, you know, certain financing. It impeded them from doing certain things. And, you know, that's where I struggle with some of these things, because I understand what this is getting at, but I also, like, then it falls upon someone in our police department to make a decision whether or not this facility should be licensed based on that, or whether this person should work there or volunteer. And I don't know, you know, I just, it seems like subjective, and so I just feel more comfortable if we left this out. I hear what we're saying. There's plenty of examples where people are required to go through a background check, and I think that is, in many cases, the appropriate sort of, you know, policy for businesses to decide on their own. And, you know,
Well-
I think the laws that exist for schools are very important. You know, that's been expanded to daycare facilities and others, but, yeah.
We could mandate background check, then it's just not the town responsible. I mean, I'm sure there's, for childcare, to get a license for the daycare, background checks are required.
By the
And
state.
those are flawed too, because you hear of daycares that have done inappropriate things.
And people can change too, so the
Right.
background isn't telling you what somebody's gonna do in the future. It only tells you
Yeah, but they do.
maybe what they've done in the past. So
Yeah.
but you know, requiring them to get background checks is one thing, making the town responsible, the arbitrator of, and all the background check is gonna do is gonna expose, this is their history. And then the administrator has to make a decision based on this history. They'll have to have some kind of policy how to make a decision based on the history of the individual.
It would set their policy making at the facility for this, that, and the other. That would be their policy for hiring volunteers, whatever it might be. They would all probably more than likely fall under the same criteria if they're gonna be in that facility in any fashion. And so, yeah, it would be a good idea to turn that all right back to the facility owner for their own liability.
I think, you know, where those exist in state statute makes a lot of sense. Where, you know, we talked about the example of the hospital that institutes that. You know, I could think of plenty of businesses around that require it for their hiring process. I guess I'm just still hung up on the fact that, like, should it be in our planning board ordinances to require that? I feel like it's, you know, it's better either to have it standard for that private business or have it be a statewide statute.
I mean, Randy and I, we carry a pocket full of background checked licenses. that we renew every 3, every 4 years, depending on which one it is. And I got another one that's every 6 years. That's, the town police department check me on that every so often. And so,
I don't know, I think we should stay right away from,
So what's
eliminate that.
What's the wording then that you want to just take that section right out?
I'd say take it, that section
Cost of it.
17, just,
It says all staff, that's at section 17. All staff, volunteers, and individuals involved in the operation of homeless shelters shall be subject to review by the Skowhegan Police Department prior to working at the facility.
I don't think that we should do
So,
that.
subject to review is somewhat subjective. It's not saying what they're going to do necessarily for them.
No, but if, for example, you had someone out there that they didn't review and they did something, then, you know, let's say, I had a child, and the child walked by that facility, and it got molested by one of the staff. And I hire a lawyer, I'm gonna sue them, and I'm gonna sue the town because, or the police department, because they should have done a review. Like you say, should have done a review. You know, even if you don't win that, you can drag the town into it. I mean, because they're gonna go where the money is. And this facility is, the town's gonna have a better insurance policy, I'm sure, than that facility. I just don't think we
these
should.
are not money-making operations.
Yeah, I just don't think we should be responsible for that. I would eliminate the whole section 17.
You know, I would still keep something in there telling them they're required to vet.
Maybe make it part of their staff, make it part of their facilities plan.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They can use they
That
can
way
use
they
a private
know, These
service.
facilities, I'm not referencing just one that we've had issues with, we have issues with all of them, one way or the other, whether it be bed bugs or property maintenance or, you know, the police getting involved or drugs or, I mean, it's not just, nobody's singling anything out, I wanna make that clear, but there are children in these facilities. There need, I think this is more related to making sure the facility vets who is in and out of there,
Mhm.
who's looking out for the minors in these facilities if they're not vetting, and the town doesn't say that they, well, part of your licensing or part of your facilities plan, your management, your staffing plan, whatever verbiage you'd like to use, just says, hey, we need to make sure that there's a plan in place.
That I agree with, but us being responsible for it, I think we should.
I don't read it that way, so you'll have to beg my pardon, but that's not the way it was, that's not the way, in my perception of what's written there, that's not my perception at all.
So it says the police department shall conduct a review of submitted personnel information for the purpose of identifying potential public safety concerns. So it is making the police department responsible.
Facilities already submit lists of people to the police department. This stuff, like I said, I've mentioned it, this stuff
So-
does already exist.
It's already under what?
They, under their facilities plan.
Oh, under their facilities.
These
but-
places
okay.
have their own facilities plans,
Okay.
yes, absolutely.
So,
But when there's an issue, how do you hold one of these facilities accountable? I think that is the bigger question that we're facing, and that what we have faced lately is that we have this town has zero teeth to enforce anything besides a code violation or a fire code violation to these places when they knowingly do wrong or blatantly ignore that. 1 month on the phone with individuals from the state of Maine, and it was deaf ears, unfortunately. And I was saying it every day. I did experience it, and it was pretty unnerving, and it was pretty hard to deal with. There's that lack of care with these facilities that house children, or the communities that they are present in. So, in my opinion, the way I read what's written here, that's the way I interpret it. That's my job, is to interpret. You get 20 different code officers, you make 20 different separate answers on how somebody reads something, or interprets it.
In your opinion, would the police chief, does he want to do this?
I can't speak for the police chief.
You,
I know there are ongoing conversations with every department in town, and complaints and residents for this stuff to appear. I mean, it just, you know, just make it up on a piece of paper. I mean, this has gone rounds and rounds with attorneys, you know, to come up with language based upon complaints and situations that we've dealt with in town. And if you make them self-report or self-regulate their facilities plan or their, how they operate, so they stay enforced to the code, or NFPA codes or anything of that matter, it takes a lot of burden off the town. Because if they don't get a license from the select board.
how about section 22? License revocation. One of the things in there is repeated nuisance complaints. You know, there's plenty of people in town that would just soon there not be a homeless shelter here. And if they could eliminate it just by making complaints, I believe they would.
Well, and that's up to the select board. That's not up to anybody else but the select board. That's enforceable, and there's a license revocation that says shall be decided by the select board. So that's, I guess that would be up to them for that determination. So that's why that's written like that, so that it's not up to anybody except the board that's voted in by the town.
So the idea would be that, I know, but it's, shall be decided by the select board. So, but it becomes a complaint becomes a reason for being, you could be following all the rules, but yet,
Most every ordinance we have in the town of Skowhegan has that language in there. So if it's, our site plan has it in there. You can turn down somebody's site plan application at the town of Skowhegan because you think it's a nuisance and non-conforming. So you have the authority to do that. As this board that sits here. So it's written in the same way as any other ordinance that sits here.
Do you think it would be useful to add like a number of repeated nuisance complaints in a time frame within? So like repeated nuisance complaints, like 3 or more substantiated violations?
I mean,
Within
then
a
it
certain time
becomes failure to, it becomes violations. You know, at that point, it's not just complaints, it's, you know, it falls in the other language.
Then we'd have to define what a substantiated violation is.
Yeah,
And
then
then
we'd have to-
probably assign a reporting body and
You know, it would be best, I think, to have something here that doesn't leave it up to the whim of an ever-changing board. Like, the Board of Selectmen will be making the decision. If it's, you know, they get 3 neighbors don't like it, and they decide to revoke the license based on 3 neighbors that don't like it, you know, that's very subjective. You know, and one board isn't the same as the next. They're, how they'll view this, and what they'll do with it, you know, because it isn't spelled out, it's just a nuisance complaint. We should have that in the marijuana ordinance. Because every time I go by one of those places and I have to smell that stuff, I would be happy to make a complaint.
It is in there.
Huh?
It is in there. And it's in our salvage ordinance. It's in, like I said, it's in more ordinances than you think. It's in a lot.
Okay, I just don't ever remember seeing it, so.
So the select board can not issue a salvage license because it's a nuisance, and not issue an authority over a housing development because they think it's a nuisance. It's in our controlled substance ordinance, it's in our site plan ordinance, it's in our salvage license ordinance. It's in quite a few.
Well, I think we need to move on from this one. Anybody else have anything else to add? Why don't we take a vote on what to do with the whole vetting issue? So we'll have something to pass along. That seems like what are the changes that we would say we feel must be made? Did you?
I think one that definitely needs to be made is that sleeping on municipal property when shelter space is available, so that public spaces, like right in the purpose, and updating that language to include when shelter space is available.
Okay.
Anytime it says public camping or van, that needs to be, I have a few spots, on my draft here.
Everybody good with that? Yep. See head nods, okay. Jeff, you were the first one to bring out about the issue of the vetting.
Yeah, so I was just looking, I was reading, I did some quick looking around to see how other ordinances exist. I did find one, I don't know if it's the newest one, but this one is from 11/19/2024. Looks like the city of Lewiston. One of the areas that they have is staff certifications, provide annual documentation of certifications for staff, requiring certain level of training such as first aid, Narcan administration, overdose prevention, biohazard, harm reduction, and there's kind of a list here. I kind of wonder if there's a way to do staff certification and include in there appropriate background checks and vetting.
So you're not just looking at reducing, you're looking at adding to it.
You know, I was impressed by requiring that level of certification. I was thinking like, you know, if you're gonna have a facility, you probably wanna make sure that some of these people have some skills related to first aid and, you know, general safety and,
Would that be mandating, like, documenting the certifications for staff and documenting in the facility? In order to get the license, they would have to demonstrate these components. It wouldn't be the town of Skowhegan doing.
wouldn't be the town of Skowhegan, no.
But in order to get the license, they would have to demonstrate that they're taking these steps.
You know, and it could become a situation there where it's, you know, in part of an inspection, if it was like, if there was problems or there was a situation that arose, you know, what's the current level of staffing? You know, what's the staff certification? Because there's also, you know, if we're gonna think of our specific facility right now here in town, you know, a lot of that aspect is volunteer. You know, a lot of it is residents providing a level of service. It would seem like, you know, simple things like having folks trained on dealing with, you know, biohazard and first aid is probably a good, you know, standard operating procedure in that facility. You know, having some level of, you know, background check and vetted and documenting that. You know, it's interesting, cause also when you read these here, it talks about staffing and it says, you know, one or more site, they change it to be staff on site. I think we referenced that, cause that's the other thing too. What is the staffing level, I guess?
It's pretty simple, it's one.
Yeah. But, you know, who knows? I'm not sure if there's always somebody on site, like currently, identified as like a staff person. You know, that, when I read this originally, I was thinking to myself, oh, that's pretty important to have someone that you know who you can contact. So if there is an emergency there, or, you know, whether it's the police department, or whether it's, you know, code enforcement, you know, whether it's the town manager, someone should be able to pick up the phone and figure out pretty quickly who's in charge, or somebody should be able to go on site and be able to find somebody any time of day that's in charge.
So, are you removing your objections to what's written here?
Oh yeah, no, I'd pull that right out.
Huh?
I'd pull that right out. I'm talking about a strike and replace.
Okay. So what are we replacing it with? All staff, volunteers, and individuals involved in the operation of homeless shelter shall be subject to,
A background check and proper vetting.
shall be vetted. And then if you wanna put what that, identify what that is involved in that. Do we wanna make it available to, we don't want it to be the responsibility of the local PD, but if the local PD wants to, should these records be kept in file and the local PD be able to look at them? I don't know. What? I mean, the idea is to protect, our main goal is to protect the public. So how do we, if we're gonna strike and replace, what are we replacing it with?
All right, give me a second on that, reading through this.
Michelle, what
So-
do you say?
The way I read it here, the owner-operator is responsible for the cost.
Well, we
And I
don't-
think the staff and everything, volunteers should be vetted. And the people that go through there, the transients, whatever, because they have to do, I'm assuming, probably like an intake form, so they know who's there and what have you. At least have the police informed of who's there, whether they do a background check on,
You're talking about staff.
well, then I still think they need to be vetted.
This- So the staff needs to be vetted, and you're talking about the police, but
At least
the
know.
local police doing it. I mean, definitely
Yeah,
there
but
should
they
be
have
some kind of
access to a
contact
database.
information, people responsible. There should be. If you've got a license in anything, you got somebody is the responsible person holding the license, and then you got the people that are operating.
Well, I think the one that runs it lives in the house on the property.
Well, I mean, we're not just looking at the one we have, we're looking at an ordinance to fit any homeless shelter that would appear here in Skowhegan, so.
So I did find some language, so it says the homeless shelter undertakes background checks of all individuals who will be working on a compensatory or volunteer basis in the homeless shelter, sign verification by the applicant that this has been done during the past year, and will be completed on all employees and volunteers within the coming license year.
So instead of doing it before they come in and giving the information to the local PD, we're just,
Okay, so there's also a line above that. So there's evidence of an adopted policy by the applicant whereby, and then it spells that out, and I can email this to you. And then also here it says, a list that identifies every controlling person by name and by position. And I think there was some reference here of identifying the people that were in charge. So I think that, I think having a list of the folks that are in charge, controlling persons that are making decisions, whether that's like identifying the person that's, does the overnight shift, or, during the day it's somebody else, or it's a series of people. And then requiring the homeless shelter to have this, or homeless shelters in the future to have a policy where they undertake the background checks.
Mhm.
At their own cost.
Yeah, I think the fact that it's silent, the fact that it's,
Yeah.
Well, one thing to add to that, when I went to a facility to do a background check and fingerprinted and all that, I had to pay for it.
Yeah. I think last time I did it for my guide's license, I went to UMaine Farmington. They have an office there where you can go and submit to it. It was $50, and I think the time before that, I did it in a place in Augusta, and it was $50. So, some places enter in a contract, so it's like it's a service, and they may get like a flat rate. I'm just extremely mindful of the time that it also would take. We've kind of hit on the liability piece and that stuff, but also this is going to require someone at the PD to do, and I just don't feel like that's.
I don't think they have the time to do.
No, and I don't want to see us, getting into this, and then, so we're now gonna do it for like one entity or one sort of, sector. I know when I was at Lake George, the town helped me out with background checks, and I sort of felt like we were kind of part of the municipality at that time, but also like recognizing probably at some point, like, I don't know how, I assume that, is the PD doing it for every, I think I asked this question before, are they doing it, or is there a service the town has?
I don't know, that's
Okay.
an HR question.
I think that removes the ambiguity that I was sort of uncomfortable with too.
I also, what you mentioned about, first aid and different things like that, I think that would be a good requirement to have.
Mhm.
How do you administer that?
It may
Oh.
already be part of their training.
I would think they,
That may already be part of their
It's
training up
possible.
there, because,
But, yeah.
I mean, they've been
But the
they've been there a long time, so I think they would,
right, especially nowadays,
right.
some of this stuff floating around.
okay, is there any other thing there, and what did we decide about the 1,000 feet? Why should we even have that thing 1,000 feet from any other facility? You think if there was a good spot in town to have the facilities, why not have them all,
Yeah, I know.
closer together instead of a whole bunch spread out all over the place? 'Cause I don't see what reason to force.
Well, if one of the regulations is they have to be out during the day, you're not gonna want two buildings with 50 people in them each out roaming in close proximity to the same area.
1,000 feet. So that'd be 2/10 of a mile.
I think including language that, like on a case-to-case basis, the planning board can review that 1,000-foot requirement would, keep it in place in full capacity, but also provide the ability of the planning board to review shelters on a case-to-case basis. But I think that it might not be a catch-all effective rule, it has to be my first full capacity, so providing some sort of interpretability could help with some of the concerns with that hard and fast boundary. But again, like you said, it then would be different groups of people interpreting something across time, so I understand concerns about having a set number.
I think having a variance option makes sense, and then, you know, it could be something as far as, you know, I think of a, you know, say if there is a proposed facility and there's a public hearing and, you know, there's a conversation about it, you know, but to Steve's point, if there's suddenly an area in town where we're like, makes sense to put multiple or, you know, and it's interesting because we assume it's gonna be the same scale that we have currently, but if there was a smaller facility or,
Okay.
and so, just really quickly, I appreciate when we asked before in regards to other existing, and it looks like, the Needle Exchange one is, 750 feet, so. Pretty close to 1,000.
Okay. Is that good for this one? We'll take a vote. All those in favor of passing this along? This will go to whom next? To the select board? Does this have your consensus? Do you have any problems with the changes that we made?
It's not to me.
I know it's not up to you, but we value your opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand, some of the changes, I see where they, you know, they go to it, we'll pass this along with the notes, to their consensus, I understand the vetting stuff. I understand, you know, making it, you know, keeping it in-house. If there's an issue, the police department requests it, then it should be readily available as like any business would be like that as well. That deals with daycares, children, of that nature, so, yeah, no, I can understand that. So, most definitely.
Okay. Well, all those in favor of passing this along to the selectmen as we've amended it, please raise your hand. Those opposed? Okay. Just for our information, what particularly about our amendment is
I think it should have been just left as it was.
left as it was? Okay. Next,
Watch out, goggles are,
site plan review
Yeah,
ordinance.
really? Which one are we doing?
He said site plan review.
Okay.
Which, I'm gonna, which one do you think we should deal with next?
The other small ones, the cannabis moratorium,
Okay,
I've touched it,
okay,
I'd like
well,
to see if we can at least touch base on all of them. It would be a huge goal.
okay. So let's do the small one next.
Which is the moratorium?
Yes.
Okay.
Anybody have anything to bring up on this moratorium? So 180 days, the maximum that can be in effect?
Yeah, I believe it can be renewed, once after that. Or even states it in there too, if necessary.
So this would take effect until the town meeting, if the town decides.
So, sorry I stepped out. So this would be caregivers, this would be rec, this would be,
This is a moratorium on everything until for anything new.
yep,
Yes, our controlled substance ordinance and our retail ordinance and stuff is extremely out of date.
Yep.
To where the state is now, where OCD is, of how we regulate, the town's options to opt in versus opt out.
Yep.
Back in 16 and 17, when those ordinances were adopted, are extremely not, the private pharmacies, the methadone clinics, all encompassing.
Yep.
So until, it can be looked at, we're really fighting an uphill battle with some stuff that this was asked for. So this is what was drafted up.
and so, I saw what happened in Madison, I saw, so OCP would be, they're fine.
OCP has offered to work with the town on this and the town's attorney
Okay.
for a new,
Okay.
To work with their regulations and state statutes and things that have come along
Yep.
in the medical versus, a lottery system versus
Sure.
somebody, and that's up to the people in the town. It's just
Yep.
trying to get ahead of it. We've had a lot of issues lately, on licenses and addresses.
Yep.
There's a lot still out there that we don't know about. We're trying to
And this would make your job easier. I don't have any questions.
Okay.
I might be the
Sound
most
good?
liberal next to Randy, so, if you got us to vote for it, you're probably all right, so.
I just saw something today where they, cannabis has been looked at as the safe drug, but they're finding out it reduces fertility in men. So there's like a long period. You did some work on your degree involving cannabis, didn't you?
Yeah, for an economics class, I looked at the tax benefits that Colorado saw from legalizing substances or marijuana.
So anyway, sounds good. Looks like you got unanimous. Is that true? Yep, everybody's shaking their heads. Okay. That was easy.
Again, I didn't look at the health concerns of it. It was strictly a tax.
Monetary thing.
Monetary.
They seem to have a better tax capture system in Colorado than we do in Maine, I'd say.
I would assume so, yeah. I'm not super familiar with tax structure here.
Okay.
That's pretty good. I'll tell you that.
I've discovered that. Although coming from Vermont, it's not.
Well, you have to do the tax.
What specific changes are we wanting to focus on? This is very long, and I don't imagine we're gonna.
In my opinion, this is extremely short. Our existing site plan ordinance is about 50-something pages. this is 27.
Okay.
This started with changes that were brought up by new state statutes that were passed as when we started looking at this, as the parking requirements, updated parking requirements. That chart has been amended. There's a section in there for, looking at it addresses the parking issue with downtown and that new parking requirement that is if it's walkable within a quarter mile. So that stuff is in there, that was passed, in Augusta, but this has just been slimmed down. This is a very difficult ordinance to deal with out of my office whenever they come up. The staff review versus the minor versus the major, the 13 steps out of our office before it ever gets here. Basically, it is the restrictions and requirements have not changed from the existing ordinance that we have to what's slimmed down here. All the requirements are there. We're one of the only towns around that I know of that has a staff review. This basically, every site plan now, there is no minor or major. It is anything 5,000, keeps the same language, 5,000 square feet or above comes to the planning board. Come for an initial review, like we do now, and then you come back for a second meeting for anything for site plan. The major aspects of our old one, those are still in there. It just states that if you have extra steps, the same steps are in there if you're over 10,000 square feet. And there's a letter to serve, basically, like you would get from main water, but it's just a letter to serve from department heads, from different districts.
So, the elimination of the staff review, but they still are reporting to us.
With a letter that you get already from those departments.
So, but they're not gonna get together.
No.
Okay. So,
You could. You wanna buy them coffee or,
Yeah, we still get together all the time in this office. We used to, you guys, I might add and put on the record, see, we do have 2 meetings, so I see you guys once a month, sometimes 2. But yeah, you see them every day, so that is something when the project is presented, to the planning office, and then is presented at the first planning board meeting, they will provide departments with that, or we will, and they will give a letter to serve, just as they do now. Solid waste, wastewater, water department, or water district, highway department, they all give letters to serve already. So, we're extremely redundant, and when you go back to the iterations, it's just chopped up and added and added and added to the point where I read this thing 10 times a week, and I struggle and stumble through it when we get new ones out. But where do we go from here? See section A. If you, section A, see B, and then when you see B, go to option D or E, and it's just a constant. It is one of the most jumbled up, disoriented, thickest site plan reviews in the state that I've come across. And I've reviewed about 20-something different towns in preparing this. So, like I said, none of the restrictions or responsibilities or regulations that are in our ordinance are taken out. They're all still there. There was 10 pages at the end of our that's in our existing one that references other ordinances. This simply states if you trigger another ordinance, you're responsible to meet the restrictions of that ordinance. We don't need to list it again. We already have the ordinance. So it simplifies my life, your life,
My life.
staff life. And it makes the amount of questions we get trying to wade through what we have from prospective businesses and people in town and coming to towns. It's difficult. They come here umpteen times before they ever get here.
well, doing things a better way is always a good idea.
I did have 2 things that I just did it so you know I read it. One was specifically on page 9, under those signed statements, those letters. Do we need to specify here designee, or is that implied? Because I know in some cases there's been like a designee.
The letters we have now don't come from designee. The designee definition, in the staff review is designee to the staff review
Okay,
board, if somebody put it vacant.
okay,
So
that's
those
fine.
letters still come from.
Okay.
If Donnie at the wastewater
Yep.
treatment plant gives it, it's from Donnie.
Okay.
So-
Yeah, I was kind of curious if like, the deputy fire chief comes, or, okay, that's fine. And then the other thing, I just wanted to flag the parking reduction piece. I think it's well laid out. It's sort of become the practice that we've more or less adopted, so thank you for that.
That is set up to, the chart is more set up to like our shoreline zoning chart.
Yep.
Where you have subsections where you can see, right, if they can't meet a certain requirement as per what's brought out by the state now, that you have your discretion as the planning board to say, well, prove to us that you don't have the ability to park there. And as long as you meet a quarter-mile walking distance, as the new state statute will say, supposedly come July 1st of this year, as long as you're a quarter mile from a municipal lot, as a taxpayer, that you have the authority of the board to go ahead and grant that.
And so, just a quick question, written authorization from municipal officers specifying the number of parking spaces approved for use. So would that come from the select board?
From,
So under B, so D, parking reduction, and then the board shall. I just know that we had a little tap dance when we were trying to figure out parking spaces before, so I just. So it says, with evidence, the parking,
well, that they need to provide, basically by the planning staff, by us, and the site plan, like you need to provide this many if you can't.
okay,
By what the site plan requires. So if you are supposed to provide 1.5,
Yep.
and you're in the downtown and you can't,
Yep.
well, the state says that you are, as long as you have a quarter mile.
Yep.
They just need to show that.
okay.
Okay, page 3. Under home occupation, it says an occupation or profession which is customarily conducted in a residential structure or in a residential property and which is, 1, clearly incidental to the and compatible with the residential use of the property and surrounding residential uses, and 2, which employs no more than 2 persons other than family members residing in the home. Where's the 2 persons come from?
I think that, it's just a generic definition, I think that's already existing in our site plan. This also has the same definitions as our site plan now. They haven't changed, they're still there. This just brings that over. And that also is in another section in here where this does not apply to single and multi-family, two-family residences. So I think that's where that definition comes in as far as that.
So, if you use your home and you have more than 2 people that assist you in this home business that don't live there, now it's no longer treated as a residential property. Is that,
Well, that would be based off of, this ordinance and what's written here is the same as what we already have. They're, single family and two-family homes are exempt from site plan. So if you're,
but the home occupations, the idea is it saying,
well, that's all classified off International Building Code, which we use for UBEC. So that classification isn't for me, that is what's adopted by the state of Maine and UBEC. And that's what's in the International Code Council.
so basically it's saying.
That's all based on occupancy.
I know, but the idea here is home occupation.
Live, work, that's all spelled out, the work it's tied to percentages and everything. Changing that would go against what the state of Maine has adopted for international building code. That's all based on occupancies, how things are used. There's definitions in there for, live work, how they're separated, occupancy, percentage of how much you're allowed to use of your personal residence for your business before you trigger other things. So it's all spelled right out in the building code.
So that's what the two persons is reflecting something somewhere else.
Yes, it's just a definition. That is the definition of that.
So if I have a workshop at my home and I have a office manager that works 5 hours a week taking care of office stuff of my business, but they don't live there. And I have,
Well, it's a business at that point, it's not your residence. That area is business and you'd be classified in the building code. You'd have to provide things for your employee that's working in an environment. You're liable as the employer to your employee and the way things are done, and that is an office space, and that's how the occupancy would be classified as per the building code.
but you got a home occupation.
Well, you can have a mixed use. You're getting into definitions of building code, which is a whole different.
Okay, anyway. Let's go to page number 5. Number 7. If the planning board determines pursuant to 30-A MRSA 44026, as it may be amended from time to time, that this site plan review ordinance provides for a review and approval process that is at least as stringent as that provided by the subdivision ordinance, then the planning board shall review applications for approval of multi-unit residential uses and their accessory structures under this ordinance. Explain that to me.
Basically, what that says is any multi-unit buildings fall into this. So right now, depending on how the building is classified, huge apartment building, or let's use the example of the 10-unit that you guys just heard while I was not here a couple weeks ago. This is just saying that right now, it's a question of, and we run into it all the time, we ran into it on this past one, and we had trouble with it. How is classified? Well, what ordinance do I follow? Do I follow subdivision ordinance? Do I follow site plan? Well, technically, a multi-unit, if you put a multi-unit in, or multiple units on a piece of property, that technically is gonna trigger subdivision. This is saying that this is solely gonna handle those type of developments.
So
There's not gonna be a question of where, there's a gray area of where that stuff fits, and it comes up with every one of the applications in that 10-unit.
Is it gonna increase the burden for them to do a site plan as opposed to a subdivision?
No, it's just a defined avenue.
How is the mandate by the state to allow up to 5 auxiliary units on a property? How does that fall under this?
That doesn't, that's subdivision versus site.
That's subdivision.
That's subdivision.
So that wouldn't be seen as a multi, because they're not part of the same structure, but yet they're on the same lot. They're not viewed as a multi.
Right, the language we have now is very confusing on how it uses. Basically, what's said now is if you touch one ordinance or you touch that with that, you could be into that subdivision ordinance. This is gonna deal with all, there's not gonna be questions, gonna deal with all multi-unit commercial, not gonna deal with one or two families, right, because they're exempt from site plan. One or two family structures, one or two family homes are exempt from site plan as it is. This is the language that's the language in our existing one. So outside of that, this is saying, this ordinance is gonna deal with all commercial developments and units.
So if a person put 4 separate dwellings on one lot, they still have to do a subdivision.
Depends what it's used for. If
It's all residential.
it's all residential, then yes, it would fall into, yes.
Didn't the states mandate,
Well, that hasn't taken effect yet, so there are towns actually doing moratoriums against that because nobody's gotten a handle on it yet. So all we're doing is just addressing the parking and then the issues we've had over the last years of dealing with this and how to categorize certain applications for commercial property. Just takes care after a lot of towns that are out there.
so we don't have anything in here to deal with how we're going to follow that state requirement.
Well, that'll be subdivision. That doesn't have to do with site plan, that's subdivision. This is site plan.
So,
That's a whole different, and until that comes out, KB Cog's working on it. So, yeah.
so even though it's more than one unit on one lot, it's not going to get kicked into the site plan by this statement.
No.
Okay. Anybody else want to jump in and ask any questions about? What do you know about that
Subdivision?
mandate by the state to?
My understanding is that there's still lots of work being done on that specific update. And when we know more, we'll report out about it.
So isn't it already law? Isn't it already been passed by the state?
Specifically the subdivision review, or the subdivision, requirements. I don't know off the top of my head, but I can ask my office and look into it and get back to you.
They were passed, it does not supposed to take effect until January, or July 1st.
Okay.
Whether that does take effect, there could be stays, but until it takes effect, it takes effect.
Originally, I thought it was supposed to take effect January, and the town had until July 1st to do something to accommodate the new language. Is that not true?
What I've sent you, yeah, I believe that's the case, but that's not something
Okay.
there's a lot more to it than just that. There's a lot of work that needs to be done on it. There's a lot of, without getting ourselves in trouble and changing a bunch of paperwork around. You know, there's a lot more to it, like you're saying.
That's my understanding, yeah.
Yeah.
That it's been passed, but there are,
There's a lot of issues with it.
yeah, exactly. But there's,
Of how to adopt it.
yeah, amendments incoming.
There's a lot of
to
language
it,
in
yeah.
there for compact areas, for tiny homes, it might not change our plan at all. It might just say, it might be just as simple as that what we have for language during a review of ours, that our subdivision's good. The only thing we need to change is, well, instead of 3 or more constitutes a subdivision, it's 5 or more. So you could do anything 4 and under. So,
And that's something we've talked about, because it is ultimately frustrating for towns, in this
and
weird
there's
limbo.
space for the,
And we want to be able to
right.
facilitate this process, these updates, but at the moment, we're not sure, even though it's passed, exactly what the incorporation process will be at this point. And it leaves these questions unanswered, unfortunately, at this time.
Anybody else got any questions? Go to page number 8. Cutting off this second paragraph. planning office shall give written notice of the date, time, place, public hearing at which the application shall be considered as the applicant to all owners of record of land within 500 feet of the site to be developed. Notice to be mailed at least 10 days prior to the hearing. Notice of hearing shall be published in a newspaper of general circulation. Of general circulation, Skowhegan at least once.
There should be a comma there.
So it should be an in, should be added, but, how many here read the newspaper?
We had this question last meeting too, and I was the only one that raised my hand, so I was like, yeah.
I read this newspaper.
So there's other mediums, I think, today that are better than a newspaper.
Is it still a state requirement, or? Yeah, so that's the issue, is it still?
It's
It's a requirement, it's a state requirement, this is the exact language that is.
Okay,
Mm.
so,
I'm not disagreeing, it seems like we're getting to the point where
Right,
probably
yeah.
is,
It's the
yeah.
same, it's the same language. Yeah, it's, requirements.
so you guys went over this the last meeting?
No, but we had the conversation about who reads the paper, so I was like,
I don't read it front to back, but I browse through the mornings.
Sure.
Online or?
Online.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
online.
it's all online
Yeah, yeah.
you're doing.
I get mine in the mail now, cause they don't deliver it anymore. They only deliver it on Sundays, so.
I will say there was a copy of Morning Sentinel out in our office this morning, and I saw more than 2 or 3 people take a look and go through it.
I was noticing the public hearing procedures at the, down, third from last paragraph. It says, the chair shall afford the applicant an opportunity to answer any questions raised by the public, rebut any statements or information submitted, and cross-examine anyone offering testimony on the application.
My question
Sort of
is,
sounds like a court.
my question is, who's supplying the referee?
So,
That's him, that's his job,
so I was,
he's here.
Yeah.
I feel like that's captured kind of our approach, you know, maybe it wasn't in there like that before, but it feels like some of
Yeah.
our meetings.
anyway. Anybody else have anything they want to? So we need to have this to them for the next meeting.
That would be the goal, to give it to them. Yes, we are, it needs to get on by, yeah, it needs to be on by May, it needs to be on the agenda, it needs to get through the select board. And the agenda and the notes, if it's ever gonna make, if these are gonna make it to the town
Town
meeting,
meeting.
sorry.
So this is our last opportunity to review this.
This is the beginning with your notes to the select board.
Okay. Nobody has any things they need to, any questions they have about this? Well, seeing none, it's getting late.
Good.
You're happy with this, because you wrote it?
Very.
Looks good.
I'm very happy with Brian and I worked a lot on this and a lot of concerns I had. It just, stuff is so outdated and you look at, there's more amendments and iterations at the beginning of our staff or our site plan review that it takes up a half a page. And it's just, maybe we should add this and this is done so. I mean, you look at some towns and there's 12 pages long. You look at others and you look at it and it's just, it's 50 pages of redundancy, so just trying to take out the redundant stuff is, I would think it is a lot more user friendly, in my eyes, and it's based off a lot of the questions that we get on a normal basis. I mean, we'll go through some site plan, engineers and architects and, you know, Turner's part of the email trail on some of them, and, you know, you'll get 16 emails in the week asking just the confusion of, you know, if you do part A, you see part C, and if in part C it looks like the something over 5,000 square feet or in this list of stuff on commercial things, go to the planning board at least twice. You're gonna let the planning board review it, you're gonna explain it, they're gonna have their questions, answer those questions and come back. If you get everything there, hey, that's great. If you're doing something over 10,000 square feet, you still have this extra stuff you have to abide by. And here are your letters to serve, the different departments that review the project. We are, in reading, like I said, the excessive number of ordinances from majority of towns in the state of Maine, we're well behind, I think, on adjusting ours or how to do this.
That's also my office's takeaway. To survive, it's a lot more similar to many other towns in the region, and they work all the same without, some of the investigations that have to happen with the way it's currently laid out.
It was received well, and it was received better, input-wise by the town's attorney too, than the other ones that we discussed. The only real question he had on is, well, why does it say 5,000 square feet? Madison's was 2, right? Well, that's just the same language we have, and my explanation to that, to him was, well, if I go through this whole rigmarole of doing this, because I wanna build a 5 unit, or say that 10 unit, and you're at so many, square feet, right? Say you're at 4,900 square feet in a 4 unit or a 5 unit, right? And you've done all this, and your lot looks nice, it's got stormwater, it's got everything it needs to have. You've been through a 3-month process with the town. Well, next year I wanna add a garage or a storage shed to it, and it puts me over the 5,000, I've gotta go right back through. Or it adds square footage, and I've gotta go through this whole thing all over again for a garage. So I guess it limits that too, I guess, with my, leaving it the same. So I'm open to suggestions on the square footage. I just figured we'd keep the same, which has been passed down and really hasn't changed on the requirements of our site plan. Just trying to make it easier for everybody along the way.
Okay. What's the consensus here? All in agreement, pass this along?
Mm-hmm.
We got nods all around, so we're all in agreement. I guess, no new business. No selectmen here. Aaron, do you have anything else for us? And Jeanette?
Nope.
Dan? Jeff?
I'm good, thank you.
Michelle?
All good?
I was just, one thing, I was just thinking the other day, remember when you came over from the sewer treatment, he was gonna get back to us on adding fees, but he's never, know anything about that? He wanted to add, for people that live in
He's
town,
filling in as the town manager right now.
well, he's got plenty of time.
So there was other aspects of that besides just the fees, though. Are we not doing anything with the sewer ordinance at this time for town meeting, or is that?
So I'm not sure where it's at. I know it's getting worked on. I've seen a draft of it, and as far as I know, the work on it is not changing anything.
Okay.
Is just removing the fee schedule as we have with solid waste. Basically, solid waste with anything, and keeping fee schedules in. I think that was the consensus you guys had too, of keeping fee schedules in ordinances, especially when times change. You have to go through this whole thing in town meeting to change a fee because the trucking fee changed or the caustic material changed. So I think that's the basis of where it's at.
Okay.
More to come, I'm not really sure. I know Brian and Donnie were working on it, but
But if we were going to have that for a town meeting, we'd probably need to take it up at like our next meeting.
I believe so, and I'm not sure where that is.
Okay.
I'll talk more. It was vaguely brought up, I think, a
Yep.
week ago.
I don't know
Brian's
where,
application, but
I
yeah.
don't know where I got the idea, but I don't remember who I was speaking with, but the idea was that wasn't gonna be our decision anyway.
Oh, interesting.
Because there was some opposition and to the ideas presented. But I don't remember, I can't recall what.
I don't know. Last I knew it wasn't getting changed, anything, so I think it's just the fee schedule charts me as we remove most of my.
that everything? Brandon?
Yeah, that's it.
Turner?
I do have something, I promise I'll be quick. So last meeting, we talked about data centers and beginning to have discussions about if we want to pass something. Or I don't know if we got that far, but LD 307, the statewide moratorium on 20 megawatts or larger data centers, that was passed on April 6th, or passed in the House on April 6th. And then Gardner just completed an ordinance that I'm actually not sure how far along it is, but I believe it's gonna be at the next town meeting, agenda. And it's called the Battery Energy and Data Storage Systems, ordinance. And if anyone's looking to learn more about how something like that might be constructed or read, that, is where some good example language in there.
So I would just add the data center moratorium bill is sitting on the governor's desk. So it did make it through the House and the Senate, and will be up to the governor to decide to sign or veto. I know there was a Maine Calling program today on Maine Public Broadcasting. It was about that, so if anybody wants to sort of listen to that and the broader discussion.
Maine Calling.
Yeah, from Maine Public Broadcasting, so there was sort of, some different opinions and a lot of folks that called in and provided information, so, but that's what I have, so.
Are they, is the big negative about those, how much power they take?
Power,
It's the
water.
water usage, 'cause you need to consistently cool the computer.
So water.
So it just
water too.
runs through water. And also, there's this myth that it's like bringing industry into the town, but really these facilities don't require many employees. So while there's some tax incentive to having these in your town, it's not necessarily providing any workforce benefits.
They
My
just,
understanding, at least, I could be.
they just had a, and I just read something about that too. And like you said, it does, it brings a lot of money in temporarily.
Exactly.
But they're giving them also.
These are
huge
for
tax
what,
breaks,
AI?
Yeah,
You know,
That's
so it's like,
basically what,
doesn't make any sense to me. These companies are making billions of dollars and you give them a tax break. They should be, they're asking a lot and actually not giving that much.
And a lot of that has been in the Southwest, right? Correct.
Yeah, Louisiana.
Okay, you in the Southeast then.
Virginia, I think, has considerable amount.
Mm.
And they're talking about doing that stop.
I think the reason why we started speaking about this is because oftentimes old mill towns are an ideal site for these. So I guess we started having a conversation just to try to potentially get ahead of anything. There's no plans to my knowledge.
are we an old mill town?
Well, I know there's some in the region.
Actually,
And,
Lincoln, they've talked about, I have a place up
Yeah.
in Lincoln, and they've talked about converting that mill to, they thought about that option, trying to entice the data center up there.
Well, any of these old mill sites, they get access to water.
And usually power.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Mhm.
so.
yeah.
And
phase.
That was more about my office. not
now,
so-
don't they, aren't they trying to, have them provide their own power? So basically, when they come in, they have to basically provide their own power generation. That's one of the big things that the federal government is trying to trying to mandate. Otherwise, our power system's already taxed. I'm not talking about financially, but it's already, it isn't able to handle what we have already, let alone those things, so.
Well,
Anyway,
some of the,
With,
those
with what,
data
with
centers
what
have-
they're dealing with, this is just from a plumber's perspective, okay? What they're dealing with, how much are they gonna wanna depend on anybody's grid for power? Really? How much are they, having your own power source, it's like paper mill. Having your own power source is beneficial. When the town is black, we're still making paper. And that's the basic theory of, what would be with those.
Well, they are looking into
Yeah.
many nuclear power plants. And
Yeah.
they're actually, some of their thought is that what they will do is they'll come into an area and say, we'll provide you with power.
Is there any talk in the state about nuclear power growing here?
You know, it was interesting, they referenced that on the program today. I was just in transit and I heard something and I hadn't paid attention to that, so I think it's come up, but yeah. And then there's, you know, talk always of bringing facilities back online.
Anybody got a motion?
I got a motion to head for 9 Kennebec Street.
Okay.
I think that was an adjournment and I'll second that.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye, aye.
We're adjourned. Don't forget to sign the paper.
Yeah.
He's already handing it around.
And he was just waiting on you.
I don't think I get to sign it.
Oh, that's right, you weren't here.
Yeah,
That was good.
you signed the wrong spot.
I know, I just bumped myself up.
Occasional.
So, Dan, how's family?
Doing okay.
The cats and the dogs?
What's the record
Oh, yeah.
for these?
What?
What's
Yeah.
the record for,
We just had to.